The views and opinions expressed on America's Workforce Union podcast and its digital media channels are solely those of the speakers and do not necessarily represent the views and opinions of the producers or sponsors.
Welcome to the America's Workforce Radio Podcast, the flagship production of the American Workers Radio and Podcast Network, where organized labor and its never-ending fight to protect the rights of the American worker come first. Now, presented by LIUNA, Laborers International Union of North America. Here's your host, Ed Flash Ferentz.
After 13 months, nurses represented by the Teamsters vote to ratify their first union contract. Meanwhile, 17,000 engineers at Boeing close to calling a strike vote. And today on the show, the National Labor Office of Blue Cross and Blue Shield and the president of the Professional Aviation Safety Specialists. Welcome to the Wednesday, August 26th edition of America's Workforce, where we're available on at least 5 platforms, including YouTube, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Spotify, and Pandora. We have 2 guests joining us on the show today. We're going to kick things off with Merrilee Logue. Merrilee is the executive director of one of our great sponsors here on the show, the National Labor Office of Blue Cross and Blue Shield. They represent about 18 million workers in America. And it's important that those workers stay healthy and they eat properly. And today, we're going to talk about food as medicine. That's right. And I'll tell you, a lot has changed here this year because earlier in 2026, the USDA and HHS, Health and Human Services, updated their federal dietary guidance with greater emphasis being placed on protein and dairy and getting away from processed foods. We'll talk about that, this big shift. Also, medically tailored meal programs and a produce prescription program. Now, keep in mind, we're not talking about food replacing your medicines here. No. More or less like a supplement. And also, she's going to talk about the labor component here, a nutrition plan for a construction worker or firefighter should not necessarily look the same as one for an office employee. Okay? We're going to get into all of this with Merrilee Logue. Then we're going to go to David Spiro. David is president of Professional Aviation Safety Specialists, passnational.org. And this is our continuing series of Labor 132. This coming Monday, well, actually a week from Monday, will be the 132nd anniversary of the creation of Labor Day as a national holiday. And David is going to talk about the history of PASS. PASS is turning 50 next year. Their first constitutional convention took place in Chicago in February of 1977. And we're also going to talk about the 25th anniversary of 9/11, how that affected aviation and the entire industry. And we're also going to touch on the current efforts to modernize our national airspace system, which needs a whole lot of work, no doubt about that. Passnational.org is a website you want to go to. Now, a brief look into the world of labor. This segment brought to you by Boyd Watterson Asset Management. You can find more at boydwatterson.com. $38 billion of assets under advisement. Registered nurses at Corewell Health East, represented by Teamsters Local 2024, have voted to ratify their first union contract after more than 13 months of negotiations, delivering a historic victory for nurses and patients all across Michigan's largest healthcare system. This is a 3-year deal. It protects more than 10,000 nurses at 9 hospitals and campuses and dozens of outpatient clinics. Highlights include a 15% wage increase over the life of the agreement, a one-time lump sum payment on a previously withheld wage increase, a safe staffing committee that allows nurses to confront management directly on nurse-to-patient ratio issues. Corewell nurses knew their value when they organized to become Teamsters, and now they have proven it at the bargaining table, said Sean O'Brien, general president of the Teamsters. Sean goes on to say Corwell threw millions of dollars at union-busting consultants and attorneys to stop this contract from happening, but our members refused to let management buy their way out, giving them the strongest contract they have long needed. Now, Corwell Health East RNs first made history 2 years ago when they voted 3-1 to organize in one of the largest NLRB elections in decades. They subsequently received a charter by the International Union for their own nurse-led local union, and now Teamster RNs have inked an industry-leading contract that protects nurses and patients alike. Michael Browning is a radiology nurse at Corwell Health East. He says this contract is a significant step towards securing a better future for nurses, thus making a better future for our patients. So darn important there. So darn important. Meanwhile, members of the Society of Professional Engineering Employees in Aerospace, better known as SPEA, which represents about 17,000 Boeing engineers and techs, have rejected Boeing's proposed contracts and authorized their bargaining teams to call a strike after the current agreements expire on October 6th. Union members cited concerns that salaries have failed to keep pace with inflation and that the jobs are moving out of state. Around 64% of members voted to reject the contracts, while nearly 88% voted to authorize a strike. By the way, members of SPEA previously went on strike for 40 days, and that was 26 years ago in the year 2000. All right, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, the National Labor Office of Blue Cross and Blue Shield talking about food as medicine. That story after this on America's Workforce.
You're listening to America's Workforce with Ed Flash Ferens.
It takes LIUNA to keep America running. Over 70,000 public employees are part of LIUNA, the Laborers International Union of North America, delivering critical services such as healthcare and emergency response, as well as maintaining roads and sanitation systems. Even the National Postal Mail Handlers Union, representing over 47,000 U.S. postal workers, is affiliated with LIUNA. Find out what it takes for LIUNA to keep America running at liuna.org. That's LIUNA.org.
America's Workforce is brought to you in part by the United Steelworkers. You can find more at usw.org. America's Workforce is brought to you in part by the Communication Workers of America. You can find more at cwa-union.org. This segment of the show is brought to you by the Brotherhood of Maintenance of Way Employees Division of the International Brotherhood of Teamsters. For more information, please visit bmwe.org.
Now, back to America's Workforce. Here's Ed Flash Ferens.
And remember, you can check us out on Facebook or follow us on X, formerly known as Twitter. That would be AWF Union Podcast, AWF Union Podcast. How many times have you heard the saying, you are what you eat? You are what you eat. I can't tell you how many times I've heard that. And I'll tell you, it's important. Diet is important. Joining us right now, longtime supporter of America's Workforce on behalf of the National Labor Office of Blue Cross and Blue Shield is the executive director of that organization. That would be Merrilee Logue. Now, Merrilee, you and I have talked about this in previous podcasts, and I think it's important that we take a deep dive into this today. I know you've been researching this, and I'll tell you, it's so darn important. There's a lot of choices out there. Sadly, many Americans are making the wrong choices. So why don't you give me a little background on food being medicine? Go ahead.
Well, Flash, thanks for having me back. And we've addressed this topic twice this year, just outlining what the details are under what is food as medicine. And we have smarter people than myself at Blue Cross Blue Shield that are clinicians. And so we have great information that we've shared already. I think I'll recap that beginning this year, our government changed the dietary requirements in the food pyramid, leaning it more on healthy fats, lots of protein, respectable carbohydrates, and looking for a balance. And under that, guys, understanding that good nutrition equates to good health, even to the point where if you are suffering from something or have a predisposition to something like diabetes, that what you eat actually can help and predict what your outcome is. I'm not saying that it replaces medication in a lot of instances, but it really sets the foundation for each of us to have the most healthy life we can, and also to have what we'll soon talk about, the happiest life we can. So, nutrition plays a really good part on it as a preventive measure, and also if you're suffering from a chronic disease.
Well, let's talk about the emphasis, and this is, I understand, part of the new guidelines on protein and dairy. I mean, those are two big elements in our diet today. Oh, you got to have more protein. Got to have more protein. Watch the carbs, right? Because those carbs turn to sugar. You mentioned diabetes, very important there. I love my bread. Oh my God, I love my bread. I got that from my dad. My dad used to pick up a loaf of rye bread from a local bakery when I was growing up. A little bit of butter on that. Oh man, that was so good. And I'm thinking about it now. I want a piece of bread. But anyway, talk to me about protein and dairy.
So, Flash, I'm Italian. My grandmother and my mother, we were weaned on bread and pasta. So, all the farmers are going to be happy in listening to us and saying, dairy is not the bad guy. Dairy is a very good source of protein. And do want to say to everybody, I myself am not a clinician, but I'm just sharing the guidelines that, were changed by the USDA. And dairy is important and protein is important. It helps build, muscle. It really is great long-term fuel for our bodies. But fruits and vegetables, which was always important in the food pyramid, again, are being supported, and healthy grains. So the bread's still in there, but we're looking for minimally processed, less sugar. And, my mother used to tell me, shop on the outside of the food store, not on the inside aisles. So bread is still there, but we really want an emphasis on protein every meal, every snack, making sure that fruits and vegetables, fiber, all of that is part of it. And another thing for that too is trying to stay away from preservatives, additives, food color. All of that is not necessarily good for us to digest on a regular basis.
I understand this is not much of a theory anymore. I mean, food is medicine. It goes way back. And also, this is a two-part answer here because I understand, well, you got the federal government's guidelines, okay? But some states are a little more proactive than others. But let's talk about the theory and let's talk about what's happening, especially in different parts of America, if you will.
So there's been a movement, not just this past year, but a movement on making sure that our food that we consume as Americans is the best quality and that it is accessible, available, and some states have taken their responsibility, and they've actually changed some of the state laws to address some of the not only access to food, but making it affordable. It's the combination of the federal guidelines and the states making some of these state programs. It's not just food banks and Meals on Wheels and things for people who may not have the income to purchase healthy foods that can be sometimes more expensive. But it's other things like nutrition programs and being able to have tailor-made meals for people that can be suffering from a certain illness. So it's important for all of us to really take a step back and look at who are we? What are my numbers, to have that preventive care and the blood work done to figure out what specifically do I need? What does my blood work show? What's available in my own state for me? And what programs are accessible and what's nutritionally good for me? And it's not just the states, Flash, but a lot of the insurance carriers have programs that are embedded in the insurance plans that many of our members have. And it could be an access to a nutritionist or a dietitian, or a concept called medically tailored meals. So based on whatever somebody's chronic illness is or preventive care, that dietitian could tailor a meal to that person's needs. And there's also something called a produce prescription program, allowing providers to actually prescribe fruits and vegetables as part of a treatment program. So it's something old school, but innovative at the same time.
Merrilee, this one is hitting home for me, and I'll tell you why. I had a checkup. I'm on Medicare now. And it's interesting, too, because it changes when you go on Medicare. When you're working, you have a different, health plan. But when you're on Medicare, obviously, that's in the sunset part of your life, and they're going to try to keep you healthy as long as they can. And the doctor that I talked to was saying, you know what? He looked around, he measured my waist, and he said, I'm thinking you need the Mediterranean diet. I'm sure you've heard about the Mediterranean diet many, many times. It goes to what you just said about fruits and vegetables and nuts. And we have a Lebanese restaurant right down the street from us. And boy, I tell you, they got some wonderful items on there for a Mediterranean diet. That being said, it seems to be going in that direction now, with doctors saying, you can do a lot better living a longer life, a healthy life, by watching what you are putting in your body. And that's just one example. Obviously you're on the other side of the fence here. You're trying to make sure that members of the Blue Cross Blue Shield get the best for their money. You see pretty much, doctors like I just encountered saying the same thing.
Yes, Flash. And what's interesting to me? I'll see members who won't put regular gas in their car, but they'll put, fast food in their bodies. So the same kind of rigor and thought needs to be put in when we consider what we're eating, because it is fuel, but it also is entertainment, it's social, it's community. And I love the fact that you talked about a certain cuisine. And I think that it's so great way to pull a community together by trying each other's cuisines. And there is always a healthy avenue and an unhealthy avenue. And listen, this is a balance. So again, I think that it's not saying have this strict across the board, but you really want the base of your diet to be the premium.
You mentioned your Italian heritage. I'm going back to that ciabatta bread. Dip it in a little bit of oil. Oh, boy, does that sound good. Merrilee Logue is our featured guest of the show right now. She is Executive Director of the National Labor Office of Blue Cross and Blue Shield, one of the many proud sponsors of America's workforce. What about the labor connection? A lot of union members face conditions like diabetes, heart disease, high blood pressure, obesity. We'll address that next right here on America's Workforce. Don't go away.
You're listening to America's Workforce with Ed Flash Ferens.
There is unity and strength for workers.
We are the USW.
We are the USW.
The United Steelworkers.
The largest industrial union in North America.
We represent 850,000 members in the U.S., Canada, and the Caribbean.
We work in metals,
rubber,
chemicals,
paper,
oil refining,
atomic energy, and the service sector.
We are steelworkers, standing strong and fighting for what's right.
America's Workforce is brought to you in part by the International Federation of Professional and Technical Engineers. You can find more at ifpte.org. America's Workforce is brought to you in part by the Ironworkers. You can find more at ironworkers.org.
American workers are sick of struggling to get by. It's time to get ahead. In the Teamsters Union, workers are winning industry-leading contracts, historically high wages, fully paid health care, and retirement benefits you can count on. Across the country, Teamsters fight alongside our brothers and sisters to secure a better life. It's what we've been doing and how we've been living for more than a century. When we fight, we win. Join us. Be a Teamster.
America's Workforce is presented by the Labor's International Union of North America. Feel the power right now at liuna.org.
Now, back to America's Workforce. Here's Ed Flash Ferens.
And remember, you can check us out on at least 5 platforms. That includes YouTube, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Spotify, and Pandora. And when you get an opportunity, here's what you do. Just sign up and receive our shows on a regular basis and give us a rating. Always appreciate those 5-star ratings, so please keep them coming. Trying to keep you healthy. You work hard for a living. You deserve a long and healthy life. Our guest is Merrilee Logue, no stranger to America's workforce, on behalf of the National Labor Office of Blue Cross and Blue Shield, one of our great sponsors here on the show. All right, I know you work with, 18 million union members across the country, and I'll tell you, a lot of them, they're working hard. They've got health plans, good health plans, because they're in a union. And, we've seen health insurance really get up there over the years, the last maybe couple of decades here. And what we're hearing from a lot of institutions is, hey, you got to take a little bit better care of yourself. And it's hard to do. People are working hard. They got family commitments and all that. But you work with union members all the time, Merrilee, and the importance of getting the information out about nutrition. And you think about the diseases that are out there today of diabetes, big one, a really big one. And there's some degree of control there when it comes to your diet. Let's start right there, if you will. Go ahead.
For over 30 years, I've been working with unions. I actually started my career as a teacher. And I think it's important to recognize that a lot of union workers work shift work or don't have the luxury of being able to eat when they're hungry, that they have to be on a particular schedule. And sometimes that schedule's really not the norm. They're working at night. And also, let's face it, a lot of our union brothers and sisters work very highly stressed, demanding jobs. All of that affects the ability to nutrition and when to eat and how to eat. Some of our union members are actually undernourished because they're unable to access healthy food timely. Some of them even have access issues for clean drinking water. And so it's been interesting for me to see how typical the labor movement on taking care of their members and really changing how they do things, not only on the job site, but benefits available to support the union members so they can live their healthiest lifestyle. 10 years ago, I remember walking into a fund office in New Jersey and said to them, we really have to talk about preventive care. And so they said, we did preventive care. All our union members smoke at a picnic table out front, and we took the picnic table away. Like, that is not a wellness program. And so working with them and many of the unions, we have seen such a shift in focus of what type of benefits. And from a nutrition standpoint, I've seen unions put dietitians and nutritionists in their fund office, or at least available virtually for their labor workers. I've seen fund offices actually stand up pantries so that their union members can come in and access healthy food, or set up different food trucks that are much more healthy than some of the typical ones that were coming in. And also things like being able to take breaks so that you can sit calmly and eat or hydrate. Hydration is a big one. So I've seen a big change in allowing members not only the time, but giving them the space to eat calmly and enjoy their meal, or even have a refrigerator so that they can put their fresh produce and things that need to be refrigerated while they're working their shift. But still, Flash, there's a long way to go, because when we look at the demographics of our union members, they're older than we see in some of our other clients. And so things like diabetes, cardiovascular are much more prevalent. So it's critical, not a nice to have, that everybody look at their own situation from a healthcare standpoint and the role that nutrition can play in living your healthiest life. It doesn't replace medication, but it puts a great foundation so that medication works and so that you can be healthy and live a very successful, happy life.
Yeah, I think that's the education part right there. It's going to supplement what you're taking. It's going to make that medication work better for you, and as a result, you will live a longer and healthier life. You know, one thing about this conversation, Merrilee, we're all creatures of habit. And you talked about the older demographic there. And it's tough, you know, when you're up at a certain age. Hey, you know what? I've been doing this a long time. You're not going to change. You're going to not change my habits. I know you have to deal with that quite a lot. But there's still a lot of young people getting involved. Right now, you know this, between the ages of 18 and 35, there's, especially males, a lot of young people entering the workforce. And that could be, you know, the next, well, obviously, that's going to be a generation that's going to be around for a long time. What we're talking about right now in this show, are we targeting them right now saying, hey, you know what? Get on the path of healthy living. Do it now. It makes sense. Is that, to your knowledge? I mean, what are you hearing right now?
Yes, it's for everybody. And that's why it's tailor-made for each individual. What's right for somebody who's 25 years old may be different for somebody who's 65 years old. But nutrition is for everyone. And it's teaching our children, too, what proper nutrition is. It's something that my family has embraced for generations, that teaching nutrition to your children starts very early so that they make good choices as they grow up. And that nutrition is part of their thought process when they choose to eat. What is going to be valuable to my body as opposed to what sounds good right now. And what you put in your body is what you end up craving. So sometimes it just takes, I always say, be the good Girl Scout or Boy Scout, set yourself up, buy the food, prep the food, package the food, bring it with you so that you are prepared when you're hungry and you don't make poor choices. Because if you leave it up to the moment where you're starving, if anybody's like I am, I'm eating what's ever in front of me. So being well prepared and being educated at a very early age, I think, are really important. And then the last part of that is like knowing what's important to you, knowing what your numbers are from a blood work standpoint and where you need to lean in on to make yourself the most healthy.
This is a marketing issue, clearly, because right now the fast food industry, processed food industry, they're doing a lot to try to get you hooked on the junk foods. There's no question. There's no question about it. I see that with my kids and my grandkids. And, you finally get the message that, things have to change because you got to change that diet if you want to live a long and healthy life. Now, that being said, and we're just about ready to close here, Blue Cross Blue Shield, I understand just from this conversation, and I know there's more to it, that Blue Cross Blue Shield is investing big time in this shift right now. I wonder if you could speak to that as we button this up.
Yeah, so we across our nation, in every zip code, we are investing millions in nutrition and supporting local food banks, mobile pantries, and educational programs. And it's important because, Splash, you and I have spoken about mental health and how the mental health crisis has been on the rise. And the American Psychiatric Association has made a big connection between nutrition and overall mental health well-being. And so not that it replaces medication, but we believe that this is a big, important it's important to lean in on nutrition from all aspects of health, not just the physical health, but the mental health as well. And so we have been investing. There will be more to come that I can share about what we are doing, but we have embraced it and we are supporting all our members across the country with different programs.
Merrilee Logue, our featured guest right here on America's Workforce, Executive Director of the National Labor Office of Blue Cross and Blue Shield. You can follow them at Blue Labor on LinkedIn and X, formerly known as Twitter. You take care, stay safe. We'll be doing this again, okay?
Thanks for having me on again. Speak to you soon.
All right, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, the president of the Professional Aviation Safety Specialists.
You're listening to America's Workforce with Ed Flash Ferens.
Founded in 1887, the Brotherhood of Maintenance of Way Employees division of the International Brotherhood of Teamsters represents the employees responsible for tirelessly constructing and maintaining the national rail system in America. For more than a century, the Brotherhood of Maintenance of Way Employees has proven they have what it takes to protect its members and meet the ever-changing challenges of the rail industry. Today, the BMWED continues to fight for job security, fair wages, better benefits, and safer, more modern work environments. For more information, please visit bmwe.org. America's Workforce is brought to you in part by the Heat and Frost Insulators Labor Management Cooperative Trust. Find out more at insulators.org/LMCT.
America's Workforce is sponsored in part by Boyd Watterson Asset Management, LLC. Find out more about our investment solutions tailored to meet the needs of Taft-Hartley funds at boydwatterson.com.
America's Workforce Radio is sponsored in part by the International Union of Painters and Allied Trades, District Council 6, representing painters, glazers, drywall finishers, and sign and display industry workers. They remind you that belonging to a union is your right as an American.
Blue Cross and Blue Shield companies formed out of a need to provide affordable health care to teachers, to loggers, and miners. Back in 1965, the Blues developed the National Labor Office to strengthen its commitment to organized labor. Blue Cross Blue Shield's National Labor Office remains focused on America's workers, advocating for affordable and equitable health care, partnering with strategic alliances to provide industry-leading products and services, and proudly serving more than 18 million unionized workers, retirees, and their families, all working hard for America's working families, for the health of America. You can learn more by following them at Blue Labor on LinkedIn and X, formerly known as Twitter.
Now, back to America's Workforce. Here's Ed Flash Farrens.
And remember, you can check us out on Facebook or follow us on X, formerly known as Twitter. That would be AWF Union Podcast, AWF Union Podcast. Let's go to David Spiro right now. David's been on the show a number of times. He is the president of the Professional Aviation Safety Specialists, PassNational.org. This is an organization that started back in 1977, so that means next year will be their 50th anniversary. Now, David has been associated with the PassNational for 35 years, 5 years as president, 18 years as a regional vice president. So, David, I want to take this opportunity to reflect on the history of PassNational, why it was created, how it was created. So why don't you just take us back to 1977, brother? Go ahead. It's all yours.
Great. Thanks, Flash. Thanks for having me on. It's always a pleasure to be here. So, 1977, a gentleman by the name of Howard Johansson, he was our first president. He tells a great story of how there was a fire in a room there at the New York Tracon. They had a different name for it back then. At the time, he kicked in a door. Him and a controller, they saw the smoke coming out, and they kicked in a door and they put out the fire. And the way he tells it, and he was he's passed on now, but his story was that the controller got an award and he got a suspension for kicking in the door. So he felt as though it was time for us to have a labor union. Now, deeper dive into that, at the time, PATCO was actually looking for another union to represent the technicians in there. They wanted to be a controllers only union. We got stood up through MEBA, the Maritime Engineers Benevolent Association, and we're still affiliated with AFL through MEBA. It was a bit of a journey back then. It took about 8 years after that for us to get our first contract, and it's funny, back maybe 20 plus years ago, I was here in DC as a union member, and I went out with a couple of the founders of the union, the guys that were originally out there trying to organize this, and they told us about how they would stand out in front of the buildings in the rain out in Oklahoma City, where the Aeronautical Center was, where our folks would go to school, and with cards of interest here, join a union, and outside some of the large facilities around the country, join a union, and eventually they got enough support, and finally got recognized. But in addition to that, they told me that how they would drive around the country in their vehicles and sleep in their cars sometimes and share crappy hotel rooms, and it was a real interesting story. They would by May of every year, by Memorial Day, they were out of leave. They didn't have any more vacation time, so they would have to take time off without pay to continue to organize this union. And we owe those folks everything that we stand on today.
David, it never ceases to amaze me what unions have to do to, keep our skies safe, to keep people safe. I mean, every day when I do this show, I talk to nurses. They want safe staffing so the patients can be taken care of. Workers on the job, you want safer conditions so you don't get hurt on the job. In your case, we're talking about the people that install, maintain, support, and certify air traffic control and national defense equipment. Your people are on the front line of safety, and you have to fight for that. That's got to be very bothersome for you, David.
Sure it is, and the struggles you go through. I think sometimes just to pound common sense into people's heads to say, hey, this is what it's all about. This is why we're here. Don't make it more difficult for us to do these jobs. And, you have inspectors out there that are overseeing the aviation industry as well, besides the technical workforce. And you got all the support staff out there. And you remember a year and a half ago, we're dealing with probationary employees being terminated, and that causes a ripple effect in our workforce. So there are so many things that can affect our health and on the job, not only physical health, but mental health. We have dedicated professionals that want to do this work. They do it for a reason, and they're good at it, and they want to remain good at it, and they want to be the focus of the aviation system when things aren't going well and when they are going well, and that's our job. But it is difficult sometimes and frustrates us very much.
Well, let's talk about what's happened under this current administration here, and you kind of referenced that as far as like the cutbacks and say, well, we need this worker and maybe we don't need that one. And I mean, they go through all this one by one, and sometimes they cut too far. In some cases, people were hired back. Where do we stand at Past National right now? Are we, I know you have about 11,000 members. Are we where we were before? What's the latest?
So the workforce is down about 700 bargaining unit employees overall. A lot of folks took the early retirement, the DRP as they call it. But for our technical workforce, we've been fighting this battle for 5 years now since I got elected. We have a workforce plan in place, and I told you we talked about that a little bit on the last time I was on. They're going to hire an additional 750 or 800 technicians to get us to a point where that workforce is healthy. Now, that's a huge step forward, and they're actually beginning to hire into that number this year, and they're continuing to do that. I give them a lot of credit. We did push the Congress to force the FAA to make that happen, but all said, they have a plan and they're doing it. But then now I look at the aviation safety inspector workforce. Those numbers are down on over there in that side of the house. And they don't have a plan going forward over the next 10 years to increase those numbers. So that's concerning to us. And at the same time, we're complaining about those sorts of things and the issues that cause recruitment and retention in that aviation safety workforce. They're deciding to travel the country and do an organizational health assessment and have people go out there and say, how are things going? Instead of just following our collective bargaining agreement, asserting the things in there that would prevent them from having to go out and visit 80 facilities, have people sit around the table for 2 hours and talk to them about how are things going. We know how things are going. Just ask us.
Yeah. This September is going to be the 25th anniversary of 9/11. What a day that was in American history. Almost 3,000 people died. Also, a huge impact on aviation. Take me back to that time and how Past National had to navigate through that.
It's interesting. So at the time, I was a technician in Tulsa, Oklahoma, early in the morning, an hour earlier there because it's Central Time Zone. I was getting ready to go out to one of my sites about 40 miles away, and the news came on that this had occurred, and we were all just glued to the TV. frozen in time, so to speak, watching what was happening moment by moment. And of course, as that was going on, there was a process to go out and start securing our facilities. We didn't know where. I mean, even in Tulsa, Oklahoma, we didn't know if we were a target or not. So you got to go out and physically secure facilities. You got to look around and see what's going on. At the same time, the controllers are bringing aircraft down to the ground. Pass National did a remarkable thing. The president at the time, a fellow by the name of Mike Fanfalone, put out a broadcast message to all of us and said, look, we're going to suspend our collective bargaining agreement right now. Whatever's got to happen is going to happen. You guys do everything you need to do. Don't get wrapped around the axle about what's a grievance and what isn't a grievance, and just make it happen. And, we did. And that, to our union's credit, they stepped into that really early, and we're partners in that process.
And we can't forget 9/11. Well, shortly thereafter was the creation of the Homeland Security Department and the creation of the Transportation Security Administration. And then President George W. Bush said, no union, can't have a union. And it wasn't until Obama came in that they were allowed to have a union. And now they tore up the collective bargaining agreement, right?
Yeah, tough times over there for sure. Our brothers and sisters in AFGE are fighting those battles. That's a tough job. You're day in and day out. You got to have your eyes open. You got to be focused on security. You can't, for 1 minute, be not on your guard. And, they're not the highest paying jobs in the federal government. They certainly work a lot of overtime. They were in a similar situation during the shutdown. Quite frankly, a lot of them couldn't afford to even keep their jobs for a period of time, had to leave and go and find work elsewhere. So unions in that world are enormously important when pay and working conditions and breaks and staffing and all those things are crucial to success, not only their success, but the success of the aviation system and the contribution those folks make.
We're speaking with David Spiro. David is the president of the organization called Professional Aviation Safety Specialists. Been around since 1977. Passnational.org is the website to go to. You touched on shutdown, and I understand we might be facing another government shutdown. The end of the fiscal year is September 30th. So what are you hearing right now, David?
I think they seem to be in a place where we're hoping that they're going to come to some sort of an agreement. Look, they all want to go back to their districts and campaign, and it's an election season, so you can't imagine they want to be sitting around D.C. pontificating how much it's going to cost to get us through the election day, which I think December 11th is the day that they want to kick this to. So we're hopeful that all of that's going to happen pretty soon, and we're not going to have to deal with it until after the elections and Congress can come back in, at least in a pro forma session, and give us a continuing resolution into the new Congress. But it is exhausting, Flash, to have to go through this year after year. We don't want to focus on it. We want to focus on our jobs, on the aviation system, making sure that the flying public is safe, that taxpayers are getting their dollars worth from what's going on out there. So we want to focus on those things and not have to wonder if Congress is doing their job.
David, I want to use this opportunity here to reflect on Labor Day. And you talked about the struggle to create Pass National going back 49 years ago. And there's a long history of workers going back, my God, centuries. And I want to take an opportunity here as we march toward Labor Day. This is going to be the 132nd anniversary of the creation of Labor Day as a national holiday. What's your message to those listening to this podcast right now?
My message to them is that we're still building the foundation for organized labor in the future. We stand on the shoulders of everyone who did all of these things that bring us up through 1935, the National Labor Relations Act, all the battles that were fought by organized labor through the 30s and 40s and 50s, and we can't just rest on our laurels now and say, oh, we've got it made. Those battles continue day in and day out. And if we're not vigilant, if we're not watching what's happening, if we're not keeping an eye on the powers that be, and not only keeping the things that those folks got for us and retain all of those benefits, then we're going to lose them. We owe it to our posterity to continue to fight and to continue to build that foundation.
You got to fight for a better life, and you got to fight again to keep that better life. That's what it's all about.
We got to leave it better than we found it, Flash.
David Spiro, our featured guest right here on America's Workforce, president of the Professional Aviation Safety Specialists, website passnational.org. You take care, stay safe, and happy Labor Day. Okay, brother?
Thanks, Flash. Same to you.
And that'll be it for another edition of America's Workforce. Tomorrow, Local 6 of the heat and frost insulators in Boston. Until then, all of you, have a safe and wonderful day.
That concludes another episode of the America's Workforce Radio Podcast. Thanks for listening, and be sure to subscribe so you never miss a show. America's Workforce is a production of Labor Tools and BMA Media Group. Find out more information online at labortools.com.